Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another week of The Shift with the Reluctant Gurus. This is a year of living creatively. Each week, we go through a different topic related to things that are going on in our lives, things that are universal that other people might be going through, and kind of talk through the issues or the ideas we have to do with this through our own and also through things we've read and things we've come across to help you sort of navigate these issues as well and give you some creative ideas of how to approach these things in your life. So, we have on the call today, as usual, myself, Shannon.
And Anne Marie. Hi,
So,
everybody.
hi everyone. So this week we are talking about death. Which is a fairly big and a loaded topic. And the reason we're talking about this is because I've recently gone through a bereavement a couple months ago, and it's something that kind of permeates everyone's lives as well. It's something we both have experience with in our lives, having people close to us die, but also just that general thing of death, a specter of death hanging over is quite a big thing. It's probably one of the greatest fears that people have. And something happened to me actually. Something happened to me a week ago. That is very relevant to this topic that I just
Did
remembered
you
now.
die?
I almost died. No, I suffer from panic attacks, and anyone who has ever suffered from a panic attack will know that it kind of feels like you're having a heart attack or something bad is happening to you. And if you're sort of unaware or have never had one before, a lot of people do mistake them for heart attacks. Um, so I've suffered from panic attacks for years now, for like a good 12, 14 years. And you think I would know what they're like by now, but I had something really weird happen to me, right? So I was asleep and about I don't even know what time it was because I didn't actually look at the clock, but about 3 or 4 a.m. I woke up and I had a shooting pain going up my arm from my fingertip of my center finger, which is a really odd thing, all the way up my arm into my chest. And the way I woke up, it was just like something was wrong. I had this intense feeling of dread. Like I cannot describe that feeling. It's just a horrific feeling that like something is wrong. And I couldn't really breathe. And I had a pain in my chest and I felt really super dizzy, like and disorientated and disconnected from my body, which I think is the weirdest thing. Um, so it it turned out to be a panic attack. But at the time, I was really convinced like that I was having a heart attack or that something terrible happened to me. And this may be another issue we can talk about anxiety because it's all tied into this. But the main thing is this feeling I had of like I'm gonna die, like I'm dying or something really bad's happening. And this intense feeling of like loneliness because I was going through something in the middle of the night that no one else was aware of. Um, and that feeling I'd never had before in all my panic attacks and anything, this real fear and dread of dying. And some people must go through that when they are about to die. If they're having something like that happen to them, they're having a heart attack, something kind of instantaneous, the thoughts that people have must be quite scary. Not everyone, and it depends on the way that you die, I'm sure. But I think we all have this intense fear of death inside us, and it's something we have to work to overcome in our lives. Or at least a lot of us have that. So, so that was a scary experience for me. But like, how do I go about broaching that or trying to reconcile that in my own life is a question that I have to do with death as well. What about you, Anne Marie? Is there something you want to share about death, dying?
I've always thought that like it's quite interesting, like our approach in the West, I guess, to life and death. I know in maybe Ireland is like I know in Ireland you can actually see a dead body when you go to like the before the funeral. There's another day where like the coffin is open. But they say in a lot of Western civilizations, like you can't see a dead body, like a dead body on display, like and like death is kind of taboo, and that whole thing of like again, not everyone, like some people are very family oriented in our Western world, depending on like the way they've been raised and the culture they've grown up in. But like yeah, often it's the case that like old people are kind of like, I guess like, you know, often put in like nursing homes, and like we kind of guard ourselves from death. And
Mm-hmm.
even the way we live, right? Like life in the West is all, and in modern world the reality is in the East, but like basing it on kind of this West East
Mm-hmm.
like you know, we're just built like we're always told about like accumulating, like we're here to like keep achieving, and we keep
Mm-hmm.
accumulating, and like success in contemporary society is based around this, like we keep accumulating, like we keep um like gathering more, but like there's not a huge emphasis on the time when we actually stop accumulating, like, and
Mm-hmm.
we let go, and like um you know, we get closer to leaving this world.
Mm-hmm.
um
That's interesting, actually, that you mentioned that. When I was studying anthropology at university, we had this whole sort of session and reading based around the sort of materiality of things and how humans, are predisposed to wanting to collect things, and keep things, and like that's something that goes back. It's part of our core nature, as part of survival. It started off as part of survival. The more things you had, the more likely you were to survive. And it's something that was kind of trickled down and it's still in there in our genetics. And it's something then that the advertising agencies are taking advantage of when they're trying to get us to purchase all their stuff. But I remember this reading, and now for the life of me, I'm not going to remember who wrote it. It might have been Daniel Miller. He's a very famous social anthropologist that deals with the materiality of things. Um, I think it was him. He had an article or a book, and I just remember this part in it was to do with curating. So as like we go through our life, and we're all familiar with the sort of idea of a curator as someone in a museum who chooses objects to put on display for us to have a look at, and a narrative through those objects. We do the same thing in our own lives. As we're going through our lives and as we're getting close to death, you're talking about, we curate more of our belongings. I mean, every spring cleaning is based around that. These ideas of like you need to clean out your wardrobe, you need to constantly be doing that. The Marie Kondo style of what brings you joy is another example of that. But we are constantly curating the objects that are around us. And I find that a really fascinating thing to think about, because then when someone passes away, you're left with the objects that tell their life story and the objects they've curated to tell their life story. And then also becomes the issue of what do you do with that? You have to curate them again, because you can't necessarily keep all the objects that belong to that person because you'd run out of space. You wouldn't be able to have your own then. So you create their lives again after they've passed away through these objects. And that's a really interesting thing. And the meaning that we embed in objects as well. Like I have like items of clothing that my grandmother would have given to me years ago that I hold on to, even though like it doesn't suit me and I would never wear it like in a million years, but I hold on to it because of the meaning associated with the object, and separating objects from meaning. It's just very fascinating field of like research. And I think it's something we need to be more aware of, especially as the world is getting more sustainable. Hopefully, we're becoming more sustainable. We need to look at our practices along these regards. But Something that struck me last week was this article about Elon Musk, who is now like going into space to like mine asteroids, like for the diamonds that are in them. And like if he does it incorrectly, if his team does it incorrectly, it can cause like asteroids to send off pieces all over the galaxy and like could potentially cause like problems for us on Earth. And I just thought, why? Like, why does he need more like money? And that thought came into my head exactly what you said there. It's like he can't
Yeah,
take it with you, like and
yeah.
like when do you get to a point that you need to stop and you need to take stock and like it's just really interesting.
There was kind of similar to what you're saying, using the example of Elon Musk. And I guess we kind of think of things in the same way when we read these articles. But there was a story I was reading about this, not someone I'd heard of before, but he was from Czech Republic and he was one of the richest men in Czech Republic. And there was just a news article saying that he had died I think he'd been on holiday in Alaska and there was a plane crash. But what the article contained a quote from him from the previous year. Obviously,
Hmm.
he was a businessman and he was saying like it was the time of COVID. And he was saying that something along the lines of like, because like I guess his business shrank during COVID, whatever kind of business he was in. And he was like, I'm finding this a very challenging time because like I like to see things grow. I'm like that's I'm like he wasn't saying it in any bad way, but like he was a businessman. He liked to
Hmm.
see things grow. And then the irony of like, he I guess he hadn't like in spiritual terms died before he died because like he couldn't see the kind of um value or just the normality, the balance of things. Like things
Hmm.
don't always grow. Things need to,
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
things expand and decrease, increase and decrease.
Hmm.
And there was a point in his life where he would eventually see everything dissipate. But yeah, he probably hadn't come to that realization yet. He was still in his life, like thinking that things kept growing and growing.
Mm. That
And like similar Elon Musk,
yeah.
what does he think about death? Is he ready?
Yeah, I
Wishing the
definitely
best for you, Elon, but
I don't think so. I remember reading something that he's going to be, cryogenetically like frozen or whatever. But I think if you're going down that route, you're not ready for this. Anyway, but I think you touched on something really, really lovely there. That is actually like a really nice way to approach death, which is like looking at it like the cycle of the seasons and like everything taking our um our direction from the world around us in the natural world. And I know, like, depending on where you are in the world, you may not have as distinct seasons. But taking the sort of winter, spring, summer, fall approach, it's a nice way to look at life and that we all have our springs, our summers, but we also need our autumns and our winters. And those things that you would normally do, going back to what we were talking about last week, what do you normally do in winter that fills you up and make sure to keep that a little bit of that going through your summer. Um, Death and life go hand in hand, and like there will always be a winter, but that's what enables there to be a summer. Just keeping that in mind, I think, is lovely, and trying to appreciate those different points in your life. Like right now we're in our 30s. It's a good time and we should be, using the energy that we have now and thinking about, okay, what can we do now and making the most of it. And exactly the same once we get older, thinking about, okay, well, what's my focus should be now, on maybe a little bit more like the things I might do in autumn or in winter. That's just an idea, but it's something I think definitely I'm going to try and have a look at and try and plan out my life a little bit like, okay, well, I'm in the summer at the moment. Maybe I'm a little bit, towards the end of summer. What do I usually do towards the end of summer? How can I capitalize on this experience I'm having?
I think also that it's just good generally, and maybe that's something we could ask listeners to keep in mind without trying to sound very morbid. But a lot of spiritual practices, or like I've read that like Buddhists try to keep death always in mind,
Mm,
right? Because
mhm,
it's like if you kind of like have this in your mind that like, life is kind of fragile, things aren't permanent, then
mhm,
it enables you to kind of have like a kind of softer worldview. Like when you're getting angry with like a friend because of something stupid they said, like just this reminder that like, okay, maybe hopefully not tomorrow, but like 30, 40, 50 years from now,
mhm.
we're 70 years, where are we going to be? We're going to be in the ground. Like
Yeah.
this isn't important. And you always see these movies, they make that whole on these movies, these people, or like TV shows, these people have a big argument, this family feud, and then one of them like years later gets cancer, so the other like comes back and is like, oh,
Mm,
I'm so sorry. And we don't need we don't need like death is always around us. We don't
mhm.
need those wake up calls to be kind people. So I think maybe we could ask our listeners to just like keep that in mind over the
Yeah.
next few weeks, in a not so morbid way, just a
Yeah.
a lighter approach to life when you're interacting with other people, and you know realizing
Definitely.
really what's important out there.
Yep, definitely. I 100% agree. And it's something that I often employ in stressful work situations. Two
That's a good
things
one.
I employ. It's like the first is it's not life and death for me in my work situation. I don't deal with life and death. Some of you out there who are listening might. Um, so I do that. And the second one is, will anyone remember this in 100 years' time when we're all long gone? And the answer, like 99.9% of the time, is no. So what's it worth stressing about? It definitely isn't. And I think, yeah, that's a great way to approach things. And just to, as well, for that thing of like, it's hard, we're all united in the fact that we're all gonna die. And so that brings us closer to people. And that's something that I found with grief, and just touching upon this briefly before we wrap up. But before I lost someone very, very close to me, you sort of feel like you feel sorry for people. You have sympathy for them. You you feel for them, but until you've had it happen to you, you don't know what it's like. And when you have it happen to you, myself and my friends at work were describing it as like this weird club that you get admitted into that no one ever wants to join. But then once it happens, that's you join it, and then you suddenly united with people in a way that you weren't before, and you can really understand the loss that people go through. And that's the upside to grief, I think. And that's what helps me through it. The idea that like everyone has to die and everyone's going to go through losing someone. And in a way that's a beautiful connector that we have. Um, but it is very hard, to find that upside to that sort of thing. But that's what helps me. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think again, a society that like kind of shuns grief and shuns death, it's not a very compassionate place to live. Like we need to really feel these emotions, really go through them, and it enables us to like connect better with others, and even help others through their suffering. So I totally agree with that, Shannon.
And I think like the nice reminder of the fact that we're all made of energy, like the universe is energy, we're made of energy. When our energy can neither be created nor destroyed according to science. So therefore, we when we die, our energy just gets reused and repurposed. So it's a nice way to think we live on in some way, shape, or form, depending on what you believe, but we definitely live on somehow, with the energy. So um I've had like some really weird things to end on like a high note that have happened to me since I lost my grandfather. Um, just some really, really odd things. So I decided to run a half marathon in October. and I decided to run from my grandfather's favorite charity, Sightsavers. And I'm not joking you, like the day I signed up for this, I found about 20 minutes later a white feather in the middle of my kitchen on the floor. There is no way it could have gotten there. Like there is no birds like around my house. No, no way. I had been in that kitchen all morning, like had not seen this white feather. And it was only after I'd done that, I swear to you, I like a bawled crying. I was like, this is the most beautiful thing ever. All right, Grandad, I know you're telling me that you're listening to me and that you're happy with what I'm doing. The same day I went out for a run then later on, and usually when I'm running, I listen to audiobooks. And I just finished an audiobook, and on Audible, what I listen to, it usually like when you finish the book, it just restarts the book if you don't stop it. So I didn't stop it in time, and it did something really weird. It didn't restart the book I was listening to. It went to another book in my library and started it randomly. And it was a book by Thich Nhat Hanh that was about, let me get the name of it again because I forget, um, which is called How to Live When a Loved One Dies. So I was like, oh my goodness. I actually literally said out loud, okay, Granddad, I hear you're here, you're around me today, and it's so lovely, and I thank you. So that for me was, proof that like something's going on there after someone dies, and whether it's just the energy, the love that lingers on, who knows, but it's very comforting anyway for me. Do you have any nice stories you'd like to share?
There were some things like when my mom died. I can't think of anything particular now, but yeah, I definitely touched upon a few things like that that were, yeah, small but significant to me. Yeah, where I
Mm.
was like, okay, this is a bit strange.
Yeah.
I remember like it was like my aunt's husband died, and someone was saying like that they were in the kitchen a few days after he died, and the radio, I think the radio suddenly went on, or like they were listening to the radio and then the volume like changed dramatically. And they were like, "Oh, stop joking now, Tom." And then like the volume changed completely the other way again, or something like
Oh my
this.
goodness.
That's a bit creepy. There was this really
Definitely.
good there was this really good story a few years ago in the news. I thought it was funny. This guy who died, and like he was a bit of a joker, and like he knew he was gonna die, and did a recording for when his coffin was going down, and it was something funny like, "Oh, I'll be watching over you now," like, and everyone was there like in stitches at the funeral.
I love that. That's brilliant. Showing character even after. That's brilliant. And it really ties into the Irish way of like funerals should be celebrations of life.
Exactly.
Something that's really nice that was in that book, was that like looking for your loved ones and those who've passed away in nature around you as you're walking. So when you're walking, you're going for a walk with them, and what you see is like your eyes are their eyes. So you're showing them the world through what you're doing. And I think that that's a really nice sort of creative way to approach missing someone. So maybe that's something that you can try. We'd love to hear all of your different ways of approaching death, grief, anything on the topic we've spoken about today. Please send them in to us. You can send them to our email, or you can tag us on social media at the Reluctant Gurus. And we hope that you've enjoyed the session. It's quite a long one. Thank you for listening.